Kimberly. Hi, how are we? Welcome to another episode. I have to put this out because it is a trigger warning video because we're talking about such a sensitive topic. So it's great that Kerry picked it up. But anyway, how are we all? Are we all right?
I'm great.
All good.
Doing good.
That's awesome. I thought you were going to miss us, Kimberly.
What?
I thought you were going to miss us. I literally just messaged you.
Oh, no, I was here. Just computer issues. Sorry about that.
Hey, it's all right. So, yeah, the manifestation of grief. And I thought we'd do this panel discussion just to basically talk about like the different levels and our own experiences. So, who wants to kick us off?
I guess I'll say hi. Hi, my name's Stephen Smith. Welcome, everybody. Yes, welcome everybody that's watching the show or watching it on replay. We certainly appreciate that. I'm very proud. Thank you very much, Adam, for inviting me on this show about fear. And it's actually something that I've been dealing with. I guess I wanted to start by saying, you know, I'm not a healthcare professional necessarily. I don't make any disclaimers that way. But this is my whatever I say is me. And it's not professional healthcare. If you think you need professional healthcare, I say, you know, absolutely go do that. But I'm just glad to be here. I've got a few things I wanted to share ultimately tonight and just kind of give some information. I learned over the years that having a toolbox of things that I can use when things get tough is a really good thing to have. And so I'm going to suggest that for you, if you're watching this show, to maybe get out some paper and pen, write some notes down. And, you know, if you want to send some information as far as like a comment to us, we're happy to be here and happy to help you if we can. I guess I'll start out by just saying, you know, I've had a lot of trouble lately with fear and our guilt. And guilt kind of is a fear. It was a fear of particularly what people were saying to me about myself. And so I was feeling guilty about issues. And what I've found is that I really don't need to feel guilty. Other people's opinions are exactly their opinion. They're not my opinion. I don't need to own their opinion unless I feel that like it is appropriate. And as a result, I've had this toolbox, and I'm just saying, you know, when I got stressed out and I felt guilty about something, I had to change my thinking. And when I changed my thinking, my whole life changed right then and there, because immediately I'm now preoccupied with this new thought, not what I was thinking. And I had to ask myself, well, what role do I play in this? And then do I have any control over this situation or that person or what they're saying? And I kind of analyzed it a little bit, and that's what I tend to do, is analyze things, and maybe too much sometimes. But bottom line is, I'm going to kind of wrap up here for you. I think if you are having a problem, ask those things to yourself. Well, what role do I play in this? Know that there's answers. There's always some answers. Yes.
Stephen, sorry to interrupt. Is this about the grieving process?
It is.
Yeah.
Because it is, because when I was grieving, I was feeling sorry for myself, is what I finally determined. And I know that feeling sorry for myself and getting depressed, I'll say this, I just don't do it that long anymore. And that's what's beautiful about it, is that I don't spend, in some cases, decades mulling over the same old thing that I had no control over. And so if you don't have control over it, there's not much you can do about it except for accept the situation. And that's what I do. Acceptance is the answer to my problems. Yeah.
Who's next? Do you want to come in, Glenn?
Yeah, I missed the question, but following along with the conversation, sense of self as far as grieving, I think a big part of it is being in the moment, because whatever it is we're grieving, that's past. And as you just said, we can't change it, but we can learn from it, and we work through it ourselves. And I think a big part of that is self-awareness, as mentioned earlier too. So I'm gonna pigtailing on what you just said.
Yeah, absolutely. Ashley.
So, not only being self-aware, but really when we look at grief as a whole, oftentimes we think, okay, grief comes or follows when we've lost somebody important to us, like a death or, some sort of situation like that. But we have to remember that grief is almost trauma where it's unmet expectations. It's not what we thought that it would be: a relationship, a friendship, or just an overall life situation. So when we can determine that grief is literally an unmet expectation, then we can learn to process it differently, and we can learn to work through the emotions that come along with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick?
Yeah, I think so my experience of grief is when I was about 12, I lost my stepfather to cancer. And I think with grief, one of the things I experienced was guilt. And I think I thought, should I have, this is my stepfather, so I was only building a relationship, and when I was quite young, so there's a lot of resistance to him, not accepting him. And afterwards, I think it's quite common, that I think there can be like a guilt sometimes, things I should have said or done, because obviously it's too late, when someone passes away. And I remember certainly that was a big part on me, when I went through the grief, it was like, should I be nicer? Should I things I should have said, because obviously it was too late, to do it, when it happened. So I think, I think grief, coping with grief is a thing that it never goes away. I mean, for me, it's like 30 years later, and I still grieve. I think grieving is a process that it's a process of acceptance, but it's not something that ever goes away.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, definitely, I was feeling guilt, and I think, should I have said more and done more? And I think that was something that, for me, in my experience. But I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. Kimberly?
Okay, so I'm sorry I got here late, guys, but all right. So I have another perspective, or an additional perspective to grief. It might be my background. I'm Armenian of descent, so I got raised with genocide survivors. So I think grief is in our DNA, personally, just saying. But my first loss was at 9, my great grandmother, and many situations. So I had a very hard time, like Nick, as a child, thought it was the end of my world when people left like that way. So I just want to give some interesting perspective. I've grown to look at grief as a teacher and a natural part of life, kind of like that aunt that brings you the fruitcake every Christmas, and no one likes fruitcake, but she insists on bringing it anyway. You just learn to say, "Come on in, Auntie. You want coffee or tea?" And just let the fruitcake sit on the table, and let it stay there until next Christmas. Who cares? But for what helped me, especially this past 5 years, losing both my parents, my father-in-law, my bestie, and overcoming injuries, permanent injuries from a car accident. And I think that's sometimes the unspoken grief. There's different transitions in everyone's lives. Puberty going into adulthood, becoming a parent, losing your youth, different stages of living. There's grief, so it's normal. And I think it's really important for us to learn how to, what Nick said, live with the grief, because it doesn't come and go on a schedule. At least my experience, it does not set up a nice, neat little schedule and say, I'm stopping by at 3. Are you ready? Okay, we're gonna deal with the grief today. So knowing what it looks like for each person, and the best way it was described to me when I was grieving my father, who was the second parent within 15 months to depart. It's normal. Like, I was like, why don't I have any energy? And my counselor was like, understand when you're in active grief, your energy goes down by 50%. And 30% of it, going to the shower and just like pouring yourself a cup of coffee, takes up 30%. So I was grateful to have people around me who didn't let me get stuck into the story of what's wrong with me. Nothing was wrong with me. I was grieving. And when I looked at my life through that lens, I was like, oh, okay. Now that I know what the heck is going on, now I can kind of do what I need to do. And I really resonate with what Nick is saying. I think it's something we learn to live with. It's not as acute maybe as the years go on, or maybe it comes back as fresh as it was 30 years ago. But to me, I embrace it as a teacher, and I've learned to walk with it in my life. So that's helpful to some of the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome, Brian. I know this is your first time here, and how you find it so far, even though we're about 13 minutes into it?
Great. Some really interesting perspectives and some very, I think, healthy perspectives. One of the things I do work with people in grief. That's what I specialize in. My daughter passed away 9 years ago. She was 15 years old. So that's what really kind of rocketed me into this. So the first thing I want to say, and I think everybody else has kind of agreed, that grief is not a mental illness. It's not something to be fixed. It's not a disease. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's a normal human process. And I say, if you live on this planet long enough, you will experience grief. If you have any relationships or anything that you care about, at some point we're going to lose it. And we have to, I think we should normalize that. It is something that we live with, I believe, for the rest of our lives, as Kimberly said, and I think as Nick said. That's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean we stay in that active, raw state for the rest of our lives. But as long as we love that loved one and we think about them, we care about them, we're going to carry that forward. And there's also a complex set of emotions that comes with grief. Grief is not an emotion. It's kind of a container for emotions, and it comes with all these different things. And I heard people talk about guilt, and there's guilt like, what did I do to cause their death? What should I have done, or what shouldn't I have done? What should I have said, or what should I not have said? There's survivor's guilt a lot of times. Why am I still here and they're not here? And there could even be guilt when we start to heal, that we feel like, oh, I'm healing, I'm forgetting them. So all these things, it's a very complicated thing that we have to kind of tease out and work through. But I also love what Kimberly said about grief as a teacher. And it can be something that we learn from, and we can literally grow from our grief. So as long as we embrace that perspective, it doesn't happen overnight, but it can happen over a period of time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, where did he go? We lost Adam.
Adam disappeared. Adam is having tech issues.
Okay, then I'm not the only one. I don't feel so bad now.
No. There he is. He's coming back.
All right.
Sorry about that, guys. Technology can be beautiful sometimes.
Like, what we need to do as well is, again, remember that grief doesn't have to be something that is because of a death, where we grieve that. So in my case, my parents divorced. I've got certain situations within my life that they're not the expectations that I envisioned or thought about, even as a kid. So there's certain family members that I don't necessarily have a close relationship with anymore. So we need to be able to grieve the loss of that relationship, that friendship, that family member. It doesn't have to be death. It doesn't have to necessarily be that final nail in the coffin, if you will. but just allowing ourselves to grieve the processes and the traumas that we have gone through in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And hi, Kerry. I hope you're well. Yeah, because when people hear the word grief, suddenly they think someone's dead. But that's not always true.
No.
Like, I'm going through the grieving process right now because of the fact that I've got a daughter in the system that's been adopted out. And the trauma that causes that applies to that, is a type of grief.
Yep.
And who's talking about that?
No, our society, Adam, when I was really happy that you were doing this, and I will always come on to support you, because I think you're doing great. You're making a great platform, because we don't talk about mental illness either. It's like the hidden, like we act like it. And no one, Western society in general, we don't know how to talk. We don't know how to address it. We don't know how to talk to people in grief. We kind of tell like, okay, it's been 3 days. Are we moving on yet? And that's not, and Brian, I feel so sorry. Like, I can't even imagine. That's the one, I feel like Julie McCoy of the Death Boat, let me cross, like, would you like to go over? I'll escort you. But losing a child is like the one loss. I don't even know how anybody, like, by the grace of God, does it. But the fact, and especially if you struggle with depression or any kind of mental illness, and I had depression in my early 20s. It was situational. It was an assault. But I know what came up for me was the fear, am I depressed? Am I not functioning? Because that was always like, I've worked so hard and gotten so many tools, like Stephen said, to be able to focus my mindset and do what I need to do. And if I did not have the support that I had, where I could talk about what I was feeling, that I could ask any question that I wasn't sure about, and to be told, no, you're not depressed, you're grieving, it's two different things. They feel similar. They're not the same things. And this is how you know where you are on the spiral. So that, to me, just having people there who didn't treat it like another thing that we have to deal with. It was just like, this is part of life now, and you're still going to be okay, and there's still going to be things that you're going to be able to do. And like Brian said, they live with us, right? And then we speak about them; they're always here. I'm very fortunate because I grew up in the culture that I did. Like Bruce Willis and Joel Osteen, like I See Dead People, like talking about the deceased like they were here was very normal in my household. So it was kind of like we're like the Addams family. But it gave me, as a child...
Not by me, though.
It gave me a reference in which to embrace it. I don't know how people who don't have that support function through it. So I'm really happy, Adam, that you're bringing this up and creating a discussion around it.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. Yeah. Yeah, go on, Glenn. Sorry. I could not leave you because obviously you're driving.
Well, I'm trying to be quiet a little bit and concentrate, but no, maybe that's one of the issues, the support, and that's why it's not okay to talk. I know as we go through, I'm hearing expectations, and it reminds me of when my mother passed away. She perked up, and we had expectations. We were making all these plans for her care, and then 3 days later, she was gone. And unexpectedly, and so our expectations weren't met, and maybe that's the initiating event possibly for the grief is our expectations. But then talking about communication, I mean, yeah, if you've got open communication, you can work through anything and expand your understanding by talking to people who get it. But how many people don't have that in their life? Because I look at one lady, her son died, and she grieved for 10, 15 years. And finally, in the last year or two, she has a whole room that's a memorial. And she's always, if you mention his name, she breaks down in tears. But the last couple of years, all of a sudden, I don't know what she did, but now all of a sudden she's opened up again and got back to who she is. And she's still grieving, but she's not wallowing in it. So how do we avoid that? And how do we help others avoid that?
Yeah, I think with grieving as well. Like I think sometimes people don't know what to say. People think, well, should we talk about it or should we avoid talking about it? Friends. Should we tiptoe around? Is it good? Is it how don't know how to support people? I think people are going for grieving as well. It's it's an insular thing in the sense that they only want to really they want to keep it private to an extent. Often it's that tricky thing of people don't quite know how best to support people. And I think like you said, yeah, it never goes away. It's something that always. I think because my mother with my stepfather passed away, she still regularly talks about it with my family, and I think that's for her. She for her way of coping, even 30 years later, she still talks about it. And I think it's a good thing for the family, but for her as well. And I think that's the thing, it's feeling open to be able to talk about it, because people sometimes don't know, should they, is it good to support them by talking about the person, or is it best not to talk about it? I think that can be quite.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree.
Go on, Stephen.
I was going to say, a lot of good stuff has been brought up. I have dealt with grief, and I think Kimberly alluded to it comes in all different kinds of styles. It can be just about anything. I haven't lost my parents yet. I'm grateful for that part, because I don't know how I'm going to respond to that. I'm certainly going to be sad. That's going to be a definite, and grieving for a bit. But I thought, well, that's why they call it a celebration of life. Because it is about celebrating people when they pass on. And I agree that you don't just forget things. It just doesn't go away out of your mind. It can be with you for the rest of your life. I guess what I've learned is, I said acceptance. Acceptance of a situation didn't mean that I agreed with what was said to me. Even though I felt bad about the situation because maybe I disappointed somebody, I wasn't good enough, and I felt that for a lot of my life, not feeling good enough. And so that caused grief for me, because I never thought that I met people's expectations. And so that's why I decided, based on the information that I had gained, I'm not going to concern myself what other people think about me when they're giving me a hard time and then making me think, well, what did I do wrong? Can't do that. I won't do that anymore, is what I hope. That's what I pray, because it takes practice to not get caught up on any situation, for that matter. But that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, but when it comes to grieving as well, it's not just people.
Right.
We grieve over animals passing as well.
Oh yeah.
Our own animals. And I think we should talk about that as well.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
We in my family we had a Labrador for almost 20 years, lived a long time, and it was like a family member. And we still talk about the pet dog, and it was like it's a long time. We had it when we were very young. I think I was like 8 till in my 20s now, and it was like a family pet, is like a family member. But definitely, I think grieving, like you say, it's not just death of people; it's death of animals. But also, like you said earlier, fundamental big changes. But, pets. I think, especially particularly for young people. I think often for young people, their first experience of grief is through loss of pets. So I think that's often for young people and children. That's their first experience of grieving, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I don't know what's going on with Glenn, but yeah. But I think he's joyriding. Hey, joyriding to Glenn.
Multitasking.
There we go. But anyway, what I was saying is, because obviously I know I have to put it out there, because on the 25th of July this year, the Warriors will be going, we would have been going now, 4 years or 5 years, one of them. And that was down to Philip Cham, who's obviously sadly passed away a couple of years ago. and obviously the reason I'm bringing him up because when he passed away compared to my uncle, it hit me more when Philip died because obviously I was more connected. Even though I've never met him in person, it hit me more because of what impact he's had on me and the kids compared to what my uncle did all them years. So, because I know I was very in denial when he passed away, my uncle. But when Philip died, I just went into shock. So, yeah.
That's understandable. I remember when I first met you, and it was that 4 or 5 years ago, Adam, and you were dealing with some trauma at the time. I mean, I think super recent trauma, and I'm going to say that wow, you have just come out with flying colors, and that's the beauty of it, is if you can experience something, go through the process of the grieving, and come out the other end better and have learned something, man, that's just so phenomenal. And that's really what I think we want people here to know is that it's not the end when you feel like it is the end, because there's always more if you don't take your life, right? There's always going to be more. And I hate for people to think that, they get so grieved. And I just watched a movie, and it's The Beekeepers, and it's about somebody that was scammed and they killed themselves. And so the guy's a beekeeper, and so he took care of business with it on a personal basis. It's kind of a rough movie if you happen to want to see it. But, that's what this is about. That's what I think we're all here to do, is to be a beekeeper in a way to our family, to the people that can relate to what we're talking about, that we want to nurture and help you become the best person that you possibly can. And that's why I'm so pleased to be able to be here and share that with you.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. Yeah. I see Ashley wants to say something.
Yeah, Adam. I
do this all the time. I do it all the time.
You do it all the time, and in reality, I'm just sitting here listening.
You love it. I like putting you on the spot, guys.
You do. I'm composing my thoughts. But for me, with certain situations, I have found that for me, the grief, I get stuck in the anger trap. And finding how to appropriately, if you will, release that. But I haven't had the right tools given, if that makes sense. So if you don't have the tools as a kid, when all of these things happen, and then you get to be in your 30s and you're going through the process of timelining your story and really figuring out where the disconnects have happened and why you behave the way you do, and just piecing things together. And I recently, and by recently I mean like 2 days ago, had the realization that a lot of the things that I've gone through, I'm stuck in that anger trap, and I don't know how to get out of it. I don't know how to repair any ruptures within relationships or repair that brokenness, because I've never been taught that. So now I have to retrain my brain as to, okay, what can I do differently moving forward? How can I not push people away, but repair? How can I be humble enough to say, hey, I messed up. This is what happened. This is how I felt in this situation, and then be actively listening. And I'm really battling with that, in true transparency. So just because those grief situations have happened, it doesn't mean that you can't figure out how to transition through them, no matter how old you are. It just might take a little longer.
Absolutely. And it goes back to Ashley. And I like what you said about we're angry. You said it right. We're angry because our expectations, as realistic or not, weren't met.
Yep.
So, and that it's awareness, understanding, and then it's accepting. And for people who have no clue, like no tools with grief, and I'm sure there's people on this panel who could speak more articulately to it and, with better, but there's stages of grief. Anger is one of them. It's the easiest emotion to feel because you don't want to feel the sadness and you don't want to feel the fear and you don't want to feel the loss. So you just like cap it. And then if you stay there too long, you become it, which is like really not pleasant for us or the people who are around us, but
in denial.
Right. It's the brain's way of protecting us from death, which, grieving is like a little bit of a death. So this is why it's so important to understand what grief is, to know the stages of grief, to know you're not crazy if you're feeling anything like that, and having people who can create a supportive space for you. Because whether it's a divorce, illness, death, like other people on the panel said, it already happened. It's not like you can't change what happened, although your mind tries to replay it. That's normal. It's how do you live with the reality that it's happened. And that's where for me that I find like the work to be. And yes, Ashley, everyone needs tools. You can't do it without tools. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think, Brian?
I think that the anger is really interesting. One of the emotions that comes along with grief is very common. And I just think it's kind of already been alluded to. It can be a way of avoiding dealing with the grief, because as long as we've got that anger, that righteous indignation, we can set aside the other things that we really need to work on. So when I'm working with clients, the two things I look for, first of all, is guilt, which is to me anger turned inward, and anger. Are you blaming someone else and using that as a way of avoiding actually dealing with your grief? So those are things that we really need to work through. And as you were saying, we need to have tools, because grief is a process. As I said earlier, it's not a mental illness. It's not a disorder at all. But if we try to ignore it, it can just fester. It just festers, and it can last for years. It can last for decades. So we really have to get in there with those tools and understand, what are my emotions? Why am I feeling this way? Is this serving me? When I work with clients, it's like, okay, you might have anger, but is this really helping you, or is it just tying you to the other person and making you and them feel bad? And by the way, you're not harming them when you're angry with them. They don't even know. You're just harming yourself. So we try to work through those types of things and say, let's put that aside. Let's work on it, not just ignore it. We have to express it. Because I was talking to a client the other day, and his son had taken his own life. And we were talking, and he kind of said, I'm a little bit angry at him, but I don't want to say that. And I said, no, that's fine. You feel angry. You feel like he's abandoned you. You feel like you poured all this into him. That's okay. It's okay to feel that. We have to process that. And so there are no emotions that are bad emotions, no emotions that we need to stop, but we need to process them and honor them.
Absolutely. And I think that's the difference. That's the difference. Acknowledging, processing, or letting them fester. That's the way everyone has to discern in their own self.
Yeah.
And I heard a kind of common thing about, I was never taught that. So what are we doing to teach our kids this now?
Well, I got to say something, because, it seems like later in life, I finally started recognizing, I'll just say it, the error of my ways. I've made a lot of bad choices. I've had a lot of anger and grief over not performing and feeling not worthy enough, and all that stuff that people can build up on. And I will say that all through, although they say, well, 0 to 7, that's the learning stage. And yeah, I believe that part. That's because that's a fresh mind, and it's impressionable. And so that's where it's important, like you said, Glenn, is how do we teach our kids? Because, I'm going to try to teach kids by sharing what I've learned, working on backing it up with some, official accreditation. But go to the public schools is what I'm going to do, and I'll speak to the kids, and I'll tell them my story, and I'll just be transparent and honest with them, and I'm hoping that it might get through. Because the new generation is a whole lot different than my older generation, and yet even my parents, which is even an older generation, and thank the Lord they're still here. But I think the kids are really important because that is the future generation, and I think just being honest and transparent and sharing what I have gone through is all I can do, and so that's what I'm intending to try and do.
Yeah, I want to pick up on that, Stephen, because you made some great points. Because obviously, society. I'm blaming you for this, Kimberly, for mentioning about society. So I have to say,
I have a T-shirt. It's my fault. I have a T-shirt. Blame me. It's my fault. I do.
Oh, okay.
No, because the thing is, society is saying that people aged between 0 and 3 are sponges. Okay, to a degree, I believe that, but at the same time, I believe it's bullshit because any age, we are all sponges. We all pick up on things, and it's how we respond to those because we're all learning.
So
after that, after 3 years old, we can't just stop being sponges. That's where the bullshit comes in.
Well,
I
think
that comes from, like in my work, I use the metaphor, the genie. If you look at children, they're pure genie. 1 minute they're Superman, the next minute they're a cat, the next minute they're an astronaut, and don't even tell them they can't because they're feeling it. They're doing it.
They're in the zone.
Right. You see them like just transform before you, and they're like seeing something that we don't see. But there's and there's a whole, you can study it. But when we start teaching them language, we teach them to add meaning to every event. Like when they're little, they go, "What's that? What's that? What's that? What's that? What does that mean?" And like I thought my name was No, but at the age of 3, I was like, I thought my name was No.
Right.
But there comes a point, and it's an evolution of 3 to 21, where that, I call it, the genie gets locked, and we think we're our story. We think what we were told to believe about ourselves rather than the truth. We're whole, complete, we're perfect. Life is such a risk. No one's getting out. Have whatever experience you want to have. And most families, the GI generation, the baby boomers, they didn't know about feelings. They lived through the Depression, World Wars. And I had the privilege of being raised by them. And then our generation was the one like, we're all messed up. We need to go get help. And in doing that, they all came with us. And they said, we didn't know that we were allowed to have feelings. We didn't know.
Right.
So as they got to what you're saying, Adam, the older generation became sponges too. They were open to learning, but they didn't know. Like my grandmother would say, like we didn't know. We all lived on the same block. We were all living the same life. We didn't know what was outside. We didn't know there was another way.
Yeah. No, there's a reason. The reason why I'm asking that, because obviously I know a society again is saying that, for example, and I don't wish it on anyone, but when people do commit suicide or choose to end their life, whatever.
Right.
Whatever. People, kids always seem to say, "Have I done something wrong for him or her to go away?" They instantly put the blame on themselves, and that's them traumatized. Exactly. So how do we actually? Because we can't just say, "Oh, we're not going to end the pain," when we choose to end our lives. So what can we do to change that? I think it's a hard one to get around, mate, isn't it?
I think it is. I think it's definitely hard to get around that because everybody's got their own idea and everybody thinks they're right. Even myself, that's how I felt. I'm right, you're wrong, and and this is the problem, and or that happened, or blaming people. And so, for my problems. And so when I took accountability for myself and said, you know what, some of this stuff might have been generational, like Kimberly alluded to. I wish there was more teachers like Kimberly out there, because we need teachers like that. We need teachers that care
I'll be a
about
teacher.
their students,
You can all be, we're all teachers. We're all teachers. You live like you're the generation of me. We learned to live to tell the tale. So we might be the cautionary tale. We might be the, hey, don't go down this road. Try the other one. I think we might like it better. But
right. Well, and my aunt is a teacher, and I know other people that are teachers too, and it takes a very special person. And when it comes to the healthcare, it's like, I'm not a caregiver. I always said that I'm not a caregiver because I was in the healthcare industry for many years and kind of feel like I still am. But now I guess I am. I am a healthcare provider because I am willing to share my story with other people, and I think it's healthcare related because I know it's thinking. It's all about the thinking. That's what I know. And if you can retrain the thinking, which takes a lot of work, well, they say 21 days or something of this. It could take 21 years for longer in my case. But it doesn't matter. If you can retrain your thinking to be happy, enjoy life, accept things the way that they are, and recognize that, if you don't have control over it, there's not a reason to be like really upset for any length of time about it. We're all human, so I think we all have feelings and thoughts and training that we've been taught. And so I'm trying to work on overcoming some of the things that I learned. And I know that even before Adam and I had met and been on in a show, I was saying, if I look at it from the other side of the street back at myself, that's right. Because what I thought was right, but it was really actually wrong. So when I looked at it from the other side, I said, oh, wow, that's a lot better. So maybe that's a toolbox thing that you can pull out of the kit. I think changing your thinking immediately. I know when I was drinking, somebody said, well, how about a chocolate cookie? Well, yeah, chocolate cookies, and that got me over that moment. So it could be as simple as that. And it's like, okay, that's great. So it's all about thought. It's all about what we think, what we say to ourselves. And so I'm really working hard on trying to think better and be better. And it's working, It's working, I think.
What was you going to say, Glenn?
Well, I got rid of the terms right and wrong in my vocabulary because that's expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And what's right for me may not be right for you. And what's wrong for you may not be wrong for me. And so what I use now is terminology that either works or doesn't work. And that's just simply looking at the results. There's no judgment where right and wrong are judgments. And how often do we judge ourselves with those terms?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And so now I just get to look, okay, what I did worked, I'm great. And if that one didn't work, I learned something, I get to change that.
Yes.
And I think that plays into grief because that mindset is also getting rid of those expectations. Because you mentioned earlier self-judgment and how, I live my life and like 30 years of my career in fear of doing the wrong thing, saying the wrong thing, letting people down, all those internal fears that we have. And looking back now, it was a waste. My career was not a waste. I had a good career, but
you didn't. But you were in a different story. You were in a different narrative.
Yeah, and those feelings were a waste. And I look at how much time I thought second guessing myself, and then I relate that into grief. Like when my mother passed, I had my grandmother this year or last year. My mother passed. It's about 10 years ago now. But I got to look at what she did, what she accomplished, and the things she taught me, and the good things that happened. And so, we still talk about her, but it's all about, remember when Mom did this type stuff, and so the sadness is no longer there. And I think that sadness for us in grief is an expectation, a self-expectation. We should be sad, because I know when I'm already planning my funeral, and we're going to have a hell of a party, and I'm putting it on. And you know, because I want to celebrate. I've done some good things in life, and I want people to celebrate that and not feel bad. I know my kids will, but I want them to look at what they learned from me, not at what I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what it's about as well. Obviously, I do want to hear from Nick as well and Brian, but it's all about focusing on what we can do, not what we could do.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
action,
So,
not words.
yeah. So what do you
Got to
think?
take
Nick?
action.
Yeah, I mean, so when you're saying, you know, what can we do? Like kids, I've got an 8-year-old son, and my mother's getting quite old, and she's showing signs of like dementia, and you can see it, you know, with your memory, and it's made me aware if she's getting old, she might not be around like in 5 years, and my son's very close to her, so I'm thinking, well, should I, so have conversations, or I'm starting to have conversations about, her getting old, because he's becoming aware that he can see signs she's becoming old, she's repeating herself, and little signs, and I'm thinking, should I prepare for him? Well, what stage should I prepare him? Obviously, that she's not going to be out forever. I don't want, him to, when she does pass away, to go through really, I've experienced grief at a young age, for him to go through that shock and that grieving process. I feel if I can prepare him, or should I prepare him, for the fact she's getting old and she, she won't be around forever, and what it means to be old, and what, so that's something I'm going through my son, this awareness of my mother's going old, his grandmother, and having those conversations, and yeah, I think that's something is that something we should do? I don't know, but that's certainly something. Yeah, we talk about how we support young people. I think certainly talk about often the natural thing is for grandparents to be. It's the grandparents can often go first, because they're oldest. So, is that something we should prepare for children for? So, certainly, if my own 8-year-old son, I'm sort of having a little conversation about her getting old. It always says preparing her that, as she gets older.
Yeah, I'm thinking Brian.
On that?
Well, it's interesting as we have this conversation that preparing someone for someone old passing away, we're all going to go at some point. We know that. So we know the older you get, the more your odds are getting better going. But my daughter was 15 when she passed, and she was healthy. So it could happen to any of us at any time. So this is not to say we should always walk around being depressed that any of us could die at any time, but just understanding that life is not promised to any of us. But one thing I wanted to jump in on about is because we can try to rationalize our grief away and say, well, we shouldn't have it. And especially with the perspective I have, which is kind of like what Kimberly was talking about, that my relatives are all still with me, and we're all going home, we're spiritual beings. It's all really great, but we're also human. Mm-hmm. And we can't bypass the feelings of being a human being. We can't just rationalize our grief and say, I shouldn't feel sad because of this. And that's another problem that some people have. They will say, I'm not even in grief because I'm so spiritually advanced that I don't experience, those human emotions. And one story I want to tell really quickly is there's a woman named Dr. Mary Neal who had a near-death experience and saw everything, right? She saw the other side. She met Jesus. She was taught how everything works. So she was like, I know how everything works. But she was also told that her son was going to die when he was like 18 years old. And she knew this like 10 years in advance. So she had 10 years to prepare. But when her son finally did make his transition, and he did about 19 years old, she still grieved. Mm-hmm. And when I heard her story, and this was right after my daughter passed, I realized no matter what it is I believe, no matter how spiritual I am, no matter what it's like, it still sucks. It still hurts.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, Brian. Sorry to interrupt. What's that noise?
That's me. That's my phone. I didn't want to just hold on. I'm gonna go reach over the computer. That's my. I thought you could hear it with my ear. I was hoping with the earbuds.
So it's a nice little song.
Yeah. So it again, when it's great to have this perspective, and it's wonderful. But I just want people that are listening to know that it's still going to hurt.
Yes.
And one of the problems that people have, and we talk about people taking their lives, is because they feel like, and I heard someone the other day, she talked about grief. She said, when you first grief, you're like in the waiting room. She has this term, the waiting room. And when people are in that waiting room, before they begin to process it, they think this is what it's always going to be like. It's going to feel just like this. And that is what causes people to take their lives and do all sorts of things. So having that perspective, you were talking about, Adam, teaching our children, nothing is permanent. It's going to get better. This will pass. You just have to make it through. That's what we need to teach our children, and teach our children emotional regulation. Unfortunately, our systems are so designed to teach just practical stuff. Let's make everybody into an engineer. Let's just make everybody should go into STEM, but we don't teach kids the important stuff. We don't teach them emotional regulation. We don't teach them how to have relationships. We don't teach them how to be good citizens. And unfortunately, a lot of parents of our generation and younger don't have the time to teach their children the way our grandparents did, for example. I grew up with my grandmother in the home. That was a blessing that I had, but a lot of people don't have that elderly wisdom. So we've got to find a way to get that wisdom passed down to our children.
Education.
Yeah.
Please don't get me started on the education system.
Yeah, well, education is more than what we have. Education, there's more to education than what we call education.
I agree.
And that's what's gotten lost. And like Brian said, those of us who were lucky enough to live with our grandparents, our great grandparents, which not, everyone can. There is a wisdom that comes with age. And so, Brian, you just said it, self-regulation, which there's so many books, and like you guys want, you can DM me, or Adam, I'll give you names of people who are great at teaching that, if you need to go figure out what that is. But allowing ourselves and our children to experience our emotions and not make them wrong or a big freaking crisis. Right? So, as someone who has, had trauma, been diagnosed with the labels PTSD and all that stuff, at the end of the day, we survived it all. It's now we just need a space to say, what do we do with it? And what we do with it is we feel it and we let it go. But if you don't know how to do that, or you don't have the right support, that's scarier than like going to the path of hell, the hallways of hell. Like we are just like, no. And that's when the problems start, because anything that you resist persists, what Adam said, festers. And that's where you will have a bunch of people walking around in trauma or thinking that everyday life means something's wrong with them, and they come from that place of shame or like trying to push away a part of themselves that's perfectly natural. That's where education needs to happen.
That makes sense
absolutely.
to me. It really does.
Yeah, I agree. Especially the spiritual connecting as well, because not many know about that.
I think that's a big part for me, is that spiritual connection, most certainly. Now, that's not for everybody, absolutely. But it is for me, and it works for me. Miracles happen every day. If you're willing to open your eyes to look for it, you can see it. And I might be right, I might be wrong. It doesn't really matter whether I am right or wrong in the end. I think what's important is that if I try and be as happy as I can and be positive for other people, well, that's an achievement, I think, and that's something to be proud of. And then it didn't matter whether I was right or wrong or indifferent, because I lived a happy life. And I helped other people, and that's what my goal is, because I believe I am a servant to the community, and so that's what I try and do, is be that servant. And folks, bear with me because I make mistakes too, but I'm trying to make a lot less mistakes these days, and that's what I think is the difference, is that initiative to try and be better. And I'll get better as time goes. And so, yeah, it's a late in life thing maybe for me. And I lived a good life. I did not like I didn't live a good life, but clearly, uh, I remember my kids. I just felt bad for them, and I'm estranged from all my three children. At this, well, two anyways, that won't talk to me. But because I probably told them no so many times, it was just ingrained in their brain, and it's because I was told no. And so that's, I think, something that I want to definitely not tell people no, or you're wrong, because it is about the words that you use, because I think our words have power. And so it is very important to use correct words. And so that's what I'm trying to learn, is how to present myself better,
So, yes, so going back to education, what can we do? Because obviously I know teachers are just as victims as the kids, but what do we do for home tutoring? I.e. Ashley here.
Considering
how do
I
we teach them?
I homeschool all 6 of our children. So in my opinion, even though I haven't necessarily been given all of those tools in the toolbox on how to process through emotions and to express them appropriately, I think, and I don't always express my emotions and my frustrations with my children in the most appropriate manner. But at the end of the day, being able to apologize and ask for forgiveness, it's huge. It can be a game changer when you can admit that you went too far, that you said something you shouldn't have, or you got angry at them and you shouldn't have. But I think it's also one of those, again, teaching moments when you can display that for them. So they may not always do it right. We won't always do it right or get it correct. But at the end of the day, when you keep putting one foot in front of the other and doing the best that you absolutely can with the tools that you have, and never stop learning. Learn with your children. Learn together. Because that's what's going to change the generations to come.
I agree.
Yeah, and actually, if you could be perfect, you'd be a terrible parent.
Yeah.
Because your children would be despondent
It would be really
because they would realize they could never live up to you. So it's actually it's teaching them when you show them that you make mistakes and that you have emotions and that
Absolutely.
you're not. We're all human. We're here to make mistakes.
Yeah.
I want to speak to something that Stephen said, because one of my passions is helping people understand that spiritual is not woo-woo. It's not magical thinking. It's not necessarily even religious. And a lot of times spiritual people will apologize for our outlook and say, well, I don't really know this. And I'm a very rational thinker. I'm a chemical engineer by training. The evidence points to the fact that we are spiritual beings. Near-death experiences, mediumship, I can go on and on with all types. The evidence points that way. And that's what most of humanity has believed for most of our existence until like the last 200 years when we went off the rails. That's one of the problems we've got right now. So I like the term metaphysics more than spirituality because it's reality, whether people want to accept it or not. So I'm on a one-man mission to stop apologizing for being a quote spiritual person, because it's not what I believe, it's what the evidence shows.
Right. I think that's so correct.
We need a conversation on that.
Yeah, that's really awesome, Brian.
For people who are bigger than have really got that conversation on the map in a wonderful way is the late Dr. Wayne Dyer and Dr. Joe Dispenza. They are leading that conversation, Brian, which they'd be in good company with you with the way you just spoke about it. But if people are new to this or like, what are you talking about? Those two people are highly credentialed people, science and otherwise. But yes, the science has been proved. Spirituality exists. It's not. It's the quantum field. Yeah. The more you learn about the quantum
theory
field and neuroscience, how your brain is actually creates thoughts and does what it does, it's a game changer. And that's what I would want to teach the kids. Teaching the little ones, because they do it automatically. They know all this. They're like, of course it is. But as the kids get older and they start to forget, having them live in the science and knowing that you're whatever you want to be, and circumstances don't change how your circumstance do not create who you are. Your thoughts and your feelings. That's what Dr. Brian is saying about self-regulation. Thought feeling loop. That's it. That's your reality. Everyone can love you and think the world of you. If your thoughts and your feelings do not align with that, you don't experience that. And that's what I think one of you were saying about people who take their own lives, especially young people. Here's the problem. And up until the age of 25, children do not have, their frontal lobes are not physically formed yet. That's why they do stupid stuff. Like we all did stupid stuff because we didn't have this sense of consequence, literally wired in our brain. So when they say, oh, my friend doesn't like me or they broke up with me and I'll never be okay, we look at it as melodrama. Like, oh, they don't. They literally cannot see beyond that event physically. Like there's no program in their brain yet.
Yeah.
So
the girlfriend
keep on growing.
They go out and they kill
every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I do. I just I recognize that I can still learn. And I think that's an important factor, is that you can always learn more. And like Brian said, it's not the end. This too shall pass, and I believe that. And so I wrote it down. That's how much I believe in it, that I'll share that with others. Thank you.
Absolutely. Right, so we passed the hour mark. I ain't got a clue where Glenn's gone. He's probably signal gone. I don't know. So we'll wrap up. What's final words we want to say to close this off? So I'll start with Nick.
Well, I think as Brian said, with grief, it is one thing that guarantee we'll all experience in our lifetime. I think that it is all about sort of acceptance, accepting that we all will deal with it differently, but coming to terms with it, and when it happens, and that acceptance is the hardest part. And just to say that the toolkit is about trying to help perhaps the young people particularly have the mental tools, the emotional tools, which is part of their emotional growth, as they develop, to cope, not just grief, but I think the emotional tools to cope with the challenge of life, isn't it? And grief being one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. Ashley.
Final thoughts. Just realizing that there's multiple stages of the grief cycle, and wherever you are on that cycle, you can move through it, but sometimes you'll jump back. Just know that you're going to fluctuate all the time. And once you can move into that acceptance and that hope, it still may show up periodically, but don't put judgment on yourself when it comes, because it will come in waves.
Absolutely. Kimberly.
I would just say, I'm in my world, it's all about community and relationships. So you're only one conversation away from whatever you need. There's never nothing too big. There's always somebody out there who can handle whatever you're going through. So you're not alone. You're not alone.
Yeah, I hope you can come back for another topic at some point in the year, Kimberly. I hope you can. Sure. Whatever it is. Whenever you want, I'll make time for you. You know that. I know. I appreciate it. See, I am a good person, that's all.
Thank you, Adam, and all the rest of the guests tonight. It's really awesome. I've learned. I hope that our viewers have learned something, and that they can apply something into their toolbox that they can use in the future. And just know that all of us are just a phone call or a message or away, because we're all here to help you. Thank you.
Yeah, Brian.
I want to first of all, thanks for having me. I've enjoyed this very much. What I want to say to people is, we're not designed to do this life alone, and especially when it comes to grief. So find a community, if it's online, if it's physical, whatever. Find people that you can share with, people that will make you feel normal, people that will not judge you. It's really important to be able to process these things together. So don't try to do it alone.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I hope you can come back as well, or for whatever topic, whatever.
Thanks. I'd love to.
Yeah, we're booked now until almost February next year.
Good for you. Good job.
That's incredible.
So yeah.
Well, you
Next
can always
week,
come on the Get to Know show too, though. That's what I put out
I know.
there.
Yeah,
I'm gonna get to
next week, Nancy's back, guys. So obviously it's going to be me, Ashley, Nick, and Nancy. We're back together. We've got Leanne Pritchett. She's back, and we're talking about controlling our mental health struggles. That's what she's come up with. How to control them.
Should be a good one.
Well, yeah. So I would say something on that part. Probably won't get killed. So yeah, I'll. Ashley already wants to kill me, but it's okay. I'm joking.
He froze. Ha ha.
He did.
See what happens when he's
joking, he's
nasty
joking.
and he freezes.
Okay.
All right. Thank you,
Great
everybody. I
show,
really
guys.
appreciate you.